great man, Tom and Joseph Mboya. Now, this is the actual grave. If you're keen at the edit of August 15, 1930 to July 569, Tom died at the age of 39. He was still very young, and that would mean he was still a resident within the family homestead. So this used to be just one compound that belonged to the Yege family. Yege is the father to the death of Joseph Mboya. Yege was a polygamist who had 5 wives. As we speak, we still have 4 of Yege's wives still living within the compound. We decided to separate the family homestead and the mausoleum just to give them some privacy and security. So just after this wall, we have the family homestead. Both Tom's parents died 18 years after Tom's birth, and the two were buried in the middle of the homestead. That was in 1987. Now, Tom being the firstborn of this family, Tom had his first house, the one we call Simba, just after this stage. If you're keen, you notice some rubble out. Now, the Simba is not standing as per the Luo old culture. In the Luo old culture, when somebody dies, most at a tender age and leaves behind a young family, the immediate family would sit down and agree on when to take the responsibility. That would mean there was that culture of inheritance. So after Tom's death, the family sat and agreed on Tom's brother, but immediate follower, Alfonso Pupu. The same culture would dictate that if you inherit your brother's right, you will stay and die in the same house. And that's why Tom's house is not standing around here. It was demolished. A more modern was built at the back end where you just park your buses. But then it was brought down as Tom's immediate family now moved from the family homestead to establish their home. And presently, we have Tom's immediate family living in Lambwe Valley, down just on the way to Homa Bay. That's where Tom had bought a land, and that's where he had land for his home there. Later, through the stewardship of Pamela and Alphonse, they managed to move Tom's family to the mainland. Now, Rusinga is actually a cosmopolitan, and it's surrounded by um, many communities from different places. The Ndiege family came from a clan called Wayugu. Wayugu is basically from Siaya County, an island called Oyamo. Oyamo used to be our ancestral homeland, but then there was an outbreak of seasafly that made us scatter. There are few of us who went to a place called Asembo Kanigoro. Majority of us went to Suna Migori. We go to Godkweru and Giribe were the majority. Few of us who came to Rusinga were actually related to this community. After our great-grandmother lost her husband and 2 of her sons in Oyamo, she was brought here by our family and offered a land here. Through inheritance, Ndiege Tom's father was born here, and Akomo, a sister. There is an island close to us here called Fangano Island. Fangano was actually used by the colonial government as a detention center. But then on their way out, they would visit other mainlands and islands. Then they would pick energetic men then they take them to various places of work. Tom's father is part of those who are picked from Rusinga Island to a place called Kilimambogo, just some kilometers from Thika town, the then Ukambani district at that time. They were employed in a sisal estate and they worked as sisal cutters. So that is exactly where Tom was born. So he started most of his lower primary education at the Kaba Catholic Missionary School. Later, Tom would be transferred to St. Mary's Yala for his upper primary. Upon completion, Tom joined the then Holy Ghost Secondary School. Now, Holy Ghost is today Emmanuel High School. That is where he did his junior secondary, Form 1 and Form 2. Unfortunately, Tom dropped in Form 2, citing lack of school fee. You know, the colonial government did not offer permanent employment. You would work according to your energy or ability. Then there was no proper retirement, a benefit or package. So Tom's father became sick or ill and he had to retire on a medical ground. And because he retired, there was no proper benefits, you would be given material things. So Tom's father carried on as lasher, apanga, jembe, a wheelbarrow, a bicycle, and a radio. Those were the retirement packages. So you will agree with me that those things would not make him proceed. He had to drop. But remember, the colonial government had preserved a P1 teaching course for the dropout students. So obviously Tom knew would become a primary teacher. Lucky enough, he was a devoted Catholic. He had a very good connections and relations with the Catholic priest. So instead of joining a P1 teaching course, Thomas made a way to a gym school in Mboya at that time. That was a college that was preserved for the whites. But if you're lucky to be found, if you are a black that was lucky to be found there, then you must have come from one of the royal families. Tom found himself there because of his faith or his denomination. So he was advised to take a course with the Public Health Inspectorate. The college had some advantages. They would give some tokens to the students. You would directly be employed and you would work both in the East and Central Africa. Tom wanted to work in one of the developed African countries, but upon completion, he was like hijacked or he was grabbed by the Nairobi City Council and employed as a public health inspector. Tom became one of the first black to be employed as a public health inspector. He met with a lot of ill treatments. That was because there was a lot of racism and there was a big margin between the blacks and the whites. So Tom, even though he owned an office and he was one of the top officials in the city council, he would not be allowed to wear a long trouser. Instead, he would be provided with a white khaki shirt as tacky with shoes, as opposed to his white colleagues who dress really smart on a suit, coat, a tie, and the rest. As his white colleagues would be provided with Land Rovers or be driven, Tom would be forced to trek as he goes through his normal duties. He would be paid a fifth of what his white colleagues would be paid, and he was actually restricted, would not be allowed to inspect the premises, the health facilities, and even the companies that belongs to the whites. Instead, he would be allowed to do things on those that belongs to the blacks. Now, Tom did not give up. One, because he knew the kind of family he had come from. It was a very humble background kind of family. And being the firstborn, and the parents had already retired, he needed to take care of his parents, siblings, and at least make his ends meet. So he did not care however, um, the salary was little or maybe there was the harsh treatment. He wanted to make sure he would take care of his parents. But then what came into his mind was on how to create a conducive working atmosphere that would be for both the locals and the whites. So he started by coming up with small groupings, a group of eight, 4 to 8. He would invite them into his office. He would hear their grievances and complaints, and then later he would be courageous enough to present this before the colonial masters. So this went for some time, but it worked. Later, Tom and other people decided that they wanted an organization that would now talk on behalf of the workers and at least negotiate for their salaries and wages. So this is the time they came up with an organization called the Local Workers Union Authority. This helped for some times to negotiate their salaries and wages and talk on their behalf. But this could not only accommodate the health workers. Other sectors have the same problem. So sometimes they will sneak into Tom's office to present their grievances or maybe their complaints. So Tom and others again decided that they would come up with a bigger organization that would now accommodate the entire nation. So this is the time they introduced the labor movement. Now, Tom would now walk all over the nation. He would sensitize and make sure the workers understands why it was important for them to join such unions or such organizations. Then he registered them. This made him to rise to the ranks, and he was later known all over the nation. Now, around 1950, around 1954, one of the great trade unionists from the US by the name William Shainman was in Kenya, and he happened to have met with the union leadership, Tom being one of them. Actually, he was the Secretary General. He gave a presentation on behalf of the union leadership. It was a wonderful presentation. The challenge was Tom's educational background. So when Shainman returned back, he organized for Tom's education through correspondence. Come 1956, Tom found himself in the Oxford University. He took a course on economic planning and development, and as well as political science. During his time at the Oxford University, Tom would write a lot of journals and articles. These were basically on the sufferings of the Africans in the hands of the colonial masters. And again, he left like a record or a legacy, because he became the first black to be elected a student president or a student leader in the Oxford University. When he was given an opportunity to give an acceptance speech, it was a moving one. So come 1958, Tom was officially invited by the committee in charge of Africa, that was in the US. That is the time he met people like Martin Luther King, John F. Kennedy, Harry Belafonte, Jackie Robinson, Cora West, and then lastly William Shainman. The meeting gave birth to an organization called the African American Elite Organization or Foundation. This was basically to see Kenyans and Africans through scholarship into different universities and colleges. Today, we celebrate people like Wangari Maathai, people like Kennedy Philip Ochieng, people like Adua Witi, Ononka, Kibaki, Saitoti, Kamoto, Obama Senior, and just a few to mention. So when Tom returned, he decided that he would now resign from his work as a public health inspector to now concentrate on the union. Through the union, he developed political career or ambition, and he vied in Nairobi, Nairobi Central, and he represented the entire Nairobi province in the first joint parliament. Uh, the colonial government accepted to have a joint parliament, and we remember uh, incorporating 8 members. Tom was among the first 8. They formed what was called the African Elected Members Organization, their AMO, which their aim was, one, to increase the number of Africans in the legislature, and two, it is the same organization that was used to engineer or push for Kenya's independence. We remember Tom leading 2 delegations into the Lancaster's house to deliberate on Kenya's independence. He's the same person who was also very instrumental in the writing of first Kenya's constitution. He's the same person who designed the Kenya flag. He wrote a lot of policy papers. Remember the session of paper 10 of 1965? That was meant to govern the economy of entire Africa, but then it was used even beyond. Remember Singapore, Malaysia, shared the same town session of paper 10. It was also very instrumental during the writing of the Kenya national anthem. We believe or we know it was derived from the Pokomo lullaby, but Tom had to incorporate other clauses to make it a unifying one. For example, the justice be our shield and defender, may we dwell in unity, peace and liberty, plenty be found within our borders, and others that Tom thought it was wise to be incorporated in the national anthem to make it a unifying one. Is the pioneer of the trade union movement. He even helped build the Solidarity building that today houses at Twins offices. I believe when we go around or the entire nation or the 47 counties, we not to miss a project done by him and many other things that I will not mention today. Now, he became the first minister for labor, that is before independence. But then when Kenya got her independence under Dominion, he was the minister, the first minister for justice and constitutional affairs. Later he became the minister for economic planning and development when Kenya was confirmed republic. Now Tom died a political death. It was actually a succession battle. It is believed, or history has it, that in 1968, Kenyatta had suffered a stroke and heart attack. And this forced him to call for a cabinet sitting and hinted to them that going by his health and age, he would not continue being a president. Now Kenyatta had a proposal that among the cabinet they would like choose somebody to be backed by him to become his successor. Unfortunately, when Kenyatta formed the first cabinet, immediately after the confirmation of Kenya's republic, it is believed that he had made a mistake. And the mistake was by incorporating majority of those who had come from the Ghana into the cabinet. This was not welcomed by the majority of KANU members. So it brought a division. Therefore, there was KANU A and KANU B. Now, the KANU A are the most powerful clique of ministers. They were very powerful, influential, educated, wealthy. They had mastered all the art of the ill wealth of gotten, the grabbings, and the rest. Those who are in the KANU B were also powerful, but most of them did not have proper historical background. So when Kenyatta came with the proposal, they could not agree, and it was left open that whoever would convince the elected would actually become a successor. Now, going by Tom's development record, he stood a better chance. He was seen as the obvious successor. Then the political succession battle erupted and this pitted him against the powerful clique of ministers. So because he had gone ahead of them in terms of development, he posed a threat. And now they started looking into ways and means of blocking him from contesting. There was a time they tried and sneaked an amendment to bar him from contesting. That was by raising age. That actually said, for you to vie for presidency, you must at least have 42 minutes at above. Tom had only 39, but he was a schemer par excellence. He would raise numbers in the parliament to give the amendment. So the only option was now to hatch and plot for Tom's assassination. This followed by a series of political assassination attempts. But the last one that worked was through a very close friend of his, Isaac Nash and Jenga Doroge. Now, Tom and Jenga were very close friends. They had met way back in 1960 during the inception of KANU. Jenga was just part of the youth. They worked during Tom's reign. In fact, Tom was the KANU Secretary General. And Tom secured him a job in the military. Jenga later became a sniper. And Tom decided to have him as the head of the security details. By the time he was shooting Tom, he had just come from Bulgaria, where Tom had taken him. He was one of the beneficiaries among the KANU youths that Tom had taken to Bulgaria to be trained as police reservists. In fact, they were trained as in a special military training as a sharpshooter. So when he returned, by the time he returned in Kenya, Tom had a meeting in Ethiopia, attending economic planning meeting. So when Jenga returned, he was approached and convinced by Tom's rivals, arguing they were to form the government, but Tom was the obstacle. So once it was done away with, they would form the government, and Jenga was promised to become the next in this position. So that was a big job. By that time, becoming even an assistant chief, you were among the royal families. So Jenga did not care about like the relations that they had had with Tom, and all. He was actually one of the benefactors of a majority of Tom's projects that he had done to Kenyans and beyond. He followed him closely because they worked together. And come 5th of July, a weekend, there was a football match between Gor Mahia and Mboya FC, and Tom was a patron. So he had argued he would work half day so that he would have enough time to watch the football match between Gor Mahia and Mboya FC. So when after working for half a day, Tom decided to release all his hunters. They both agreed they would meet later at the field. But because he was previously in Ethiopia, he had complained of a dry skin. So he had learned that from the office, he would drive to the chemist to buy the lotions. Then from the chemist, he would drive home for lunch and later to the field. So Jenga followed him keenly. He went into the chemist, bought the lotions, and as he came out of the chemist, he shot him twice. Tom was rushed to the Nairobi hospital and unfortunately died upon arrival. This followed by protests, demonstrations, lootings, and the entire nation came to a standstill. And therefore, Tom had been buried as quick as possible for the normalcy to return. On the 9th, Tom's body was driven from Nairobi to St. Paul's Catholic in Homa Bay. Tom's body stayed over the night. The next day, on the 10th, Tom's body was driven from Homa Bay to Rusinga home. Then on the 11th, Tom was laid to rest here. 2 years later, Tom's friends, most of them the US and the family, raised money towards the building of this mausoleum. I believe you know a mausoleum is a final resting place of a great person. So they wanted to have this as a permanent memorial in honor of Tom. This is a bit symbolic. If you look at it from the base to the tip, it takes a bullet shape, and that will tell the kind of death that Tom had faced. The few that you see are just few of his collections that he had made. A lot of them are not here just because the house could not accommodate everything. We still have a plan to put up a bigger building to supplement this so that we'll have all these collections put together. At the far end is our family cemetery. But then at your back, there's a small grave. That's an American friend of Tom's, who in his will had promised that in time of death he'd want to be buried next to Tom. So he died much later, 30 years after Tom's death. He died in the US, he was cremated, and the ashes were thrown and buried there. That was as per his will. Now, Jenga later was apprehended and presented before the court. Jenga's defense was that he was sent by a big man, though Jenga did not mention who the big man was. So up to date, the big man remains a mystery. We were made to understand that Jenga was sentenced to harm, but when the history remains there, Tom's case is still open in the court, even though there has been a lot of speculations, but it's very hard to speculate on a matter that is still before the court. So we are waiting for the last judgment, and we'll be free. We can now talk about the big man, Jenga, the motive behind Tom's killing and the rest. I beg to end my briefing there because of your time. You're free to walk around. You can take as many photos as you have. But if there is any question, you're also free to ask before I leave you to continue with the photo sessions. Karibuni.